The other mass shooting in the U.S. this weekend in El Paso, Texas, is being treated as a domestic terrorism case. What exactly does that mean? And is that type of case on the rise? For more on this question, we've invited Erin Miller onto the program. She is a program manager from the Global Terrorism Database, joining us now from Baltimore. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Now, when we talk about domestic terrorism, how does your database define it?
The Global Terrorism Database defines terrorism generally as the threatened or actual use of illegal force and violence by non-state actors to attain a political, social, economic, or religious goal through fear, coercion, or intimidation. We don't have domestic or international classifications as a criteria for inclusion in the Global Terrorism Database, and there actually are several different ways to differentiate between the two, both in a legal sense and in more of a sort of common layperson's discussion. So one of them might be just based on where the attack happened. Another might be based on who the perpetrator was. Was the perpetrator, for example, a citizen of the country where the attack happened? And another distinction that you might have is based more on the ideology of the attack. And so does that ideology, does the planning, does the intended audience for the attack transcend national boundaries?
So given that criteria, what are you looking for in the investigation in El Paso to consider whether or not this would be classified as domestic terrorism?
So it would definitely be included in the Global Terrorism Database generally, based on the information that we have so far. We're always interested in learning more as the investigation unfolds, but assuming that the purported manifesto was actually written and published by the person who carried out the attack, that information gives us enough of an indication of what the motivations of the attack were to include it in the Global Terrorism Database as a terrorist attack. Whether or not it was a domestic terrorist attack is a bit more complicated. And so because this individual is apparently a U.S. citizen, that person would be considered a domestic terrorist by that on that basis. However, a lot of the ideology suggests that even though it is a white supremacist ideology and an anti-immigration ideology, and those things certainly do exist in the United States and have for some time, there are references in that manifesto that suggest perhaps a broader, more international relevance or significance to that ideology. So I know, for example, it's my understanding that the manifesto references the shooter from New Zealand that attacked a mosque, and also references the fight that is faced by America and Europe. And so the manifesto itself suggests that the ideological impulses, the ideological motivations for this attack are not limited to domestic ideas or causes.
Now, as you mentioned, police have said they're also investigating this as a hate crime. Is this a case of one or the other, or would this be something that overlaps?
No, they definitely overlap. So there is certainly overlap between hate crime and terrorist attacks in certain cases. Some of the distinctions between them often seem somewhat arbitrary. Hate crimes, for example, might be more likely to include attacks that are more spontaneous or crop up through personal interactions or chance encounters, whereas for our definitions of terrorism that we use for the Global Terrorism Database, at least, we have some interest in including attacks that have a certain degree of intentionality or premeditation.
Erin Miller is a program manager from the Global Terrorism Database. She joined us from Baltimore. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you very much.